Great, I have to follow that. That was wonderful. Why do I vote? Like many young men, my father enlisted in the Army shortly after the attack on Pearl Harbor. At the time, he was a credit manager for a department store and living with his mother in Dallas. He found that the military ethos suited him and decided he wanted to become an officer. He applied to officer candidate school, passed all the written requirements, but failed the physical because he didn't meet the minimum weight requirement. Seeing how much he wanted it, the doctor suggested that he go out and eat as many bananas as he could stomach and come back right away for another weigh-in. He managed to choke down God knows how many of them, and thus began his career in the Army, which would span 30 years and 3 wars. He was a natural leader and loved the command assignments that put him in direct contact with the enlisted men. Later, he would be moved into higher-level command positions, but would always miss his relationship with the frontline soldiers. His love for the Army was driven by the sense of community, a community bound together by a higher purpose. He never glorified violence. There was never a gun in our house. He hated war and would never speak about what he did in wartime. For my dad, integrity and intelligence were the highest attributes one could strive for. He loved vigorous debate and would start an argument just for the fun of it. He had a very strong, some would say overdeveloped, sense of right and wrong, and had an uncompromising ethical standard. The running joke in our house was that my father would turn in his own grandmother for cheating on her taxes. Growing up poor and Jewish in Texas, he knew something of hardship and discrimination, but always believed in the power of the rule of law as a covenant binding all of us into civil community. Fast forward to 2020, and fair to say I was in a constant state of low-level rage, interrupted by brief moments of fury over what had happened in our country. I'm glad my dad was not here to see what had been elected as the 45th president. He would not recognize the country he dedicated his life to serve. A country where lying, low character, and ignorance is being celebrated and rewarded. Where nothing is more important than money, and in which a state religion has now been established and imposed. I had retired in early 2020, and like so many others, I was intent on doing something to give back to the community. I had no idea what that meant, having never done any activist work. My dear friend Mari and I had been having deep conversations about Unitarian Universalism, and I joined the church as a way to learn, get engaged, and to serve. I attended General Assembly in June of that year, something I would not recommend to folks brand new to the church. Smoke was trailing out of my ears for weeks afterwards. But I did hear about a new campaign, and it was new in this year, called UU the Vote. Toward the end of GA, there was a phone bank party with volunteers from all over the country calling into Texas to help people in underserved neighborhoods get registered and develop a plan to vote. I was terrified to cold call people, but I dove in and actually got to have a few conversations. I got to hear about how Californians moving into Texas were ruining the state with their socialism and fancy cheeses. Not kidding. But I also got to talk to a woman who would go on to register to vote for the first time. Later, when calling into Florida, I got to talk to a young man who said, "Dude, I'm taking my girlfriend and her entire family to vote." I spoke with an older woman in Georgia who politely let me introduce myself and go through a little spiel. And when I asked her if she intended to vote, she simply replied, "Oh, honey, we got this." And suddenly, my heart was full. Later, I began taking on a support role, primarily running Zoom parties for national phone banks. UU the Vote squads were formed up, and we became practiced and efficient at putting together phone bank parties that could have as many as 150 people calling voters in battleground states. In the end, 5,000 volunteers across 450 congregations contacted 3 million voters in battleground states. But something else happened. One day it occurred to me that I had friends all across the country, that inadvertently I had stumbled into community, a diverse and beloved community of common cause and shared passion. We laughed, we listened, we grew to trust each other. I had found love. I realized that this intelligent, engaged, and diverse community is a living testament to the possibility of the broader beloved community we so ardently seek to bring forth. So why do I vote? I vote to preserve our democratic norms and principles, to support the values of humane, just, and dignified treatment of all people, bodily autonomy, and a healthy planet. I vote because my dad devoted his life to ensuring that I could do so in a free and fair election. I vote because if the arc of history is to bend towards justice, then we are all going to have to do the bending.